Hello again, welcome to another episode of the Kezia Hines Show. I am your host, Kezia Hines, and this week's episode I will title it Gifted because I am preparing to interview a former fashion designer and television personality from my country of birth, Guyana. I've known this week's guest for over 20 years, and I was also one of her models when she had a fashion show in Toronto. She has lived a fascinating life, and I can't wait to dive into her story. You'll learn so much from her, just like I did over the years, so just stay tuned. I love this. Look at you.
I remember that dress.
That is what I wanted, your reaction. Yes,
still have it.
Upon entering her home, whether you have an eye for art or not, you will be captivated by the artifacts, drawings, and ornaments that reflects her life and travels. Her home is adorned with vibrant paintings, intricate sculptures, and handcrafted items from local artisans, resembling a small museum. You can't help but to ask questions, and she'll gladly share the full story behind each piece. Every item carries a memory, whether it's from a journey to a distant land or a cherished moment from her past. It's evident that this is the home of an artist, where creativity flows freely and inspiration can be found in every corner. Andrea was born in Guyana in the late 1950s. Throughout her childhood, she lived in various parts of the country, including my hometown of Linden, where she attended the Mackenzie High School just like I did. In the 1970s, she migrated to Canada. Here's her story. Okay, so the first question, what's the origin of your last name?
I think it's German.
Before you go on, I can shamefully admit that I cannot pronounce it for the life of me. Rohlehr.
Rohlehr, how I say it, but chances are if I was in Germany, they would say it Rohlehr or something like it would be a little different. But it's a Guyanese name now. So, but I have to tell you, anybody with that name is a relative of mine. That is my stepfather's name. I took that name when I was graduating university. I was born in Georgetown. I lived all over. Fun fact, I moved 18 times in 18 years that I lived in Guyana. Well, when your mom is a single mom, divorced, because my mom was divorced when I was little, you move to where it's convenient. I lived in Kitty as a child. I lived in Charlestown, lived in on Norton Street, then went back to Kitty, moved to Sabineville. We moved to Linden after she and my stepdad got married after the first year. But I always felt an affinity to Linden. It's funny, I only lived there for 2 years, but we used to go there all the time on every holiday. I was swimming every Good Friday religiously in the Watuka pool. But yes, I went to Linden. I went to Mackenzie High School, and I had gone to St. Joseph's, and then I did another year in Mackenzie High School, and then migrated to Canada in '77, long before you were born.
So, but before you migrated to 77, you would have been like 17,
I was 18. I was 18 when I came to Canada. I just turned 18 in June. We got here the day before. We were supposed to get here the day before Labor Day. We got messed up in Trinidad, and so we came in on Labor Day. And my sister and I had to go to school the next day. The longest while I didn't even know where the library was at the school. It was a big school. They had about over 1,000 students, and only about 20 of those students were minority kids. It was North Albion Collegiate, NACI is what it's called, North Albion Collegiate Institute in Etobicoke. And it's a very different school now, apparently. It has changed. But it was quite a shock, and it took us a little while to get adjusted to how everything was.
Looking at you, you've always stood out. How did you sustain relationships growing up, being somebody that stands out?
Because I have to thank my mom for that. My mother, and I'll tell any parent, I don't have any kids, but I'll tell any parent, if you teach your children not to be followers, then they're going to be okay. That is what helps with your self-esteem and your confidence. I could never tell my mother, growing up, if I went and I said to her, if I did something and something went wrong, oh, you know, Kezia was doing this, and my mother would look at me, the first thing she would say, I'm not raising any stupid children. That was the first thing she would say. Secondly, if Casey jump off the cliff, are you planning to jump behind her? So I could never, and I learned that early, I could never say to my mother I was doing something because I was following a friend. So she instilled that in me. So I never wondered about, I never cared about what people thought, and I still don't. So it gave me the opportunity to just be myself and do what I wanted to do. And so I've had some very long, really great friendships and relationships over the years, but I was never a follower with. So by the age of 9, I was selecting my clothing, what I wanted to wear, and I was allowed to develop my own sense of style even back then. I wasn't dressing inappropriately per se, but I definitely was somebody who dressed how I wanted to dress, and my mother never ever really had anything to say about my clothing or what I wore.
Is that where the love for fashion design came?
Well, my mother was very fashionable herself. Growing up at the time when I grew up, do you know the term 3 for D? That was 3 yards of fabric for $1. But ready-made clothing was really expensive. So most of us had what people call now custom-made clothing. That's the funny part of it, because that stuff is pretty expensive in this part of the world. But everybody had a dressmaker, or they tried to do their thing. And so I always wanted to wear something new and nice when I had to go to a party. So I was buying fabric, and I started, my aunt sewed. My aunt used to sew. My other aunt, she did crochet and knitting. I come from a family of people who were quite creative, and it was encouraged and it was respected. And so from an early age, as a teenager, when I started going to parties and stuff like that, I was either making my own clothes or trying to make it or have my aunt make it, and I selected styles. Sometimes I would tweak them. So I didn't necessarily see it as designing at that time, and nobody necessarily pointed that out. But because I was growing up in an environment that encouraged creativity, if my mom, whatever my mom saw us doing, she would equip us. Until you asked that question, I hadn't thought about it, but I would say if you stay, I started designing my own little outfits since I was probably about 12 or 13.
Sewing then too?
And then I didn't formalize my sewing until, believe it or not, when I went to university. So I went to the University of Windsor in 1981, and I thought, because you have electives, you have your main courses you take. Mine was communication studies, and then you have electives.
Oh,
I took yoga, I took sewing, and that's where I actually learned how to sew properly, I would say. And then I had a brief stint in New York, and the lady I was living with actually used to be she's a designer, but my dressmaker in Guyana, in Linden, before I left Linden. And I started sewing along with her. My pieces are generally one of a kind. If I dye a piece of fabric for you, and I dye somebody else, and it could be the same shade, but they will not look anything like each other. That dress you're wearing, I was in shock when I saw it. Yeah, exactly. And these pieces, the colors just don't go away.
Yeah, it
just stays.
This has been through the rockers,
and you can throw it in the washer with hot water and it's fine. But yeah, I use fiber reactive dyes. I actually took a course. That's when I changed my attitude about creativity. I never thought I was that creative. I was doing all this stuff, but never thought I was creative. And then I took a course with Liz Hughes, a fabric dyeing course. And I said that to her, and she says, no, everybody has creative aspects to them.
So you said you came to Windsor and you studied communication. Were you going into the field of broadcasting? Because I remember you being a TV
For the folks watching, don't do this. I didn't want to go to university initially. I didn't want to be a doctor or a lawyer, but I also didn't know what I wanted to do. And primarily for this reason. I am what you call multi-skilled. And people who are multi-skilled have a difficult time figuring out, well, I want to be this or that. I picked up the book. I flipped through the pages until I found
something.
I found a program that looked interesting. There was photography, there was film. I did all this: photography, film, radio, television. All that stuff was studied in my program, and it looked really interesting. And my mom had been in broadcasting, so of course, So I didn't have a desire initially to be in front of the camera, and so I said, okay, this looks like fun. that was my motivation. I wouldn't say it's for everybody, but if you're someone who is not sure, it's one nowadays a first degree is obsolete. And so that's what I did. I went.
And then you later on became a TV personality.
Well, I said that was one of the jobs I got when I went back home. I really never worked in the non. I never worked. This is the first time I'm working for government per se, but back then I worked in the non-governmental section for years. When I first, because I returned to Guyana in 1994, and I first went to work with a political organization in their public relations department.
You left Guyana high school, came to Canada,
worked for a bit, then went to university. And when I graduated university, I went to New York because couldn't find work. And I was there for a brief period of time, working with a non-governmental organization. That was my first love, and still is. I like the kinds of roles where you help people. And so then when I went back to Guyana in '94, I worked for the political organization initially. Then I went to work for the Guyana Cancer Society. I started volunteering there first, and then they created a role for me, and I was the administrator of the Guyana Cancer Society. So I was doing that, but I was also still working on my designing. In part of the past, I'd also become a makeup artist.
Yes.
Right? So during the time I was in New York, and then I went back home and I honed my skills with Paula D'Souza, who was and still is one of the best makeup artists that I know. And I actually took classes with her. She would, and all this stuff is running into each other because I was doing that. And then I also started doing my television program called Girl Talk. And it was a live show, talk show. I had a phenomenal amount of fun. I couldn't believe, like 2 days after that show started, my then husband was driving me through the KFC drive-thru, and this girl was standing along the driveway and looks in the car at me and said, "Hey, Girl Talk." And I was like, what the heck?
Alrighty.
People were recognizing. And I have to tell you though, the loss of privacy I didn't necessarily like. I also had to get used to people coming up to me in the street saying, "Hi, Andrea," and for a second, because my memory has always been a little shaky, and for a second I'd be like in my mind, "Oh, good Lord, who is this person? Did I forget their name?" After a while, I started to realize, no, these are people who watch the show, and they think they know me because they see me, and I'm the same person regardless of what. I wasn't putting on a show, and so I had to get used to that. It was a fabulous experience because I met all kinds of really interesting people. We covered we had designers on there, we had Swami on there, we had Michelle Williams from Destiny's Child. She was there when she was promoting her gospel album. I met all kinds of people, right? And so my work has always been within the non-governmental sector. I get a lot of satisfaction from helping people face-to-face and up close. And the Cancer Society experience was one I will never forget. I met some amazing people. Some of them are no longer with us. Some of them, there are lots of successes of people who got treatment and they're still with us up to today. I found out afterwards, by the way, I used to wear head wraps back then. And my other colleagues from other NGOs had this idea that apparently there was a lot of pity for me out there because they were saying how she's so young and she's had cancer. I was like, I laughed so hard when I found out. I thought, so when I went to work on the HIV project, I thought, well, now I must have HIV because I'm working on an HIV. But it was so funny because I had no idea, Yeah. I was just wearing head wraps because I'm that person. I like different things and I try different things. But that was just hilarious. But yeah.
So we've discussed your life as a designer, as a makeup artist, as a TV personality.
Yeah.
Now you're in a different phase of your life.
Yeah.
What are you focusing on these days?
Well, I have a full-time job with the government of Alberta, and I work in social services basically. Now, besides that, I am still designing jewelry. Well, I started doing jewelry design in 2014.
Okay.
I branched into jewelry. I have to say that I had designed jewelry before then, but I didn't start making jewelry until 2014. I really could not tell you why I started it. I just know that I was sitting on my couch, and the next thing I knew, I had made 30 some bracelets. And then I also started making body butters. It's very dry here in Alberta. I like to call it a desert. If you get wet here, you don't have to worry. Just sit around for a couple minutes and your clothing is dry and everything is dry. And so when I first got here, I didn't like what was happening with my skin. And I couldn't find anything in the stores that was suitable. So I did some research, and my cousin of mine was making stuff already, and she encouraged me, and I started making body butters. So that's something else that I do. So I have my job. I'm also a fully licensed rep with Primerica Financial Services. So I have clients. I offer, products like life insurance. I connect them with other vendors that we have, and I also I have team members, and I like to say that's my retirement plan.
Okay.
As I said, I'm still making jewelry, but most recently I've been focused on what they call trade beads that come out of Africa. Primarily, I think from Ghana, and it was a completely different creative process.
What is one piece of advice you would give to your younger self that you believe would be beneficial to them?
I would say that when people are critical of you, I said that my mom gave me a good sense of self and all of that, and I think my self-esteem has always been high, and my confidence as well. But a lot of times when people say things to you that are critical, a lot of times they're projecting. It has little or nothing to do with you. And so I would love to, because I think I spent some time feeling bad about something or another. And when I look back now, I realize, my goodness, that really didn't have anything to do with me. And I would tell any young person, especially because, it's interesting. A lot of the criticism I've had over the years have come from women. Women can be brutal to other women, right? And so I've had people criticize me about my body, about this, that, the other. And thankfully, because I have a high level of self-confidence and self-esteem, it didn't stick. It didn't bother me for very long. It may have impacted our relationship, but it didn't bother me. But then when I look back, I think to myself, wow, that was more about them and their insecurities, because I never felt the need to do that. I still wouldn't find the need to do that. I still wouldn't do that. I think people are beautiful. I mean, because when I look at pictures of myself when I was younger, I got criticisms about my body. As I said, there were comments about a particular part of my body. And I used to say I would have plastic surgery when I grew up. And then I grew up and I realized that the only people that ever said anything to me were women. Men never said those things to me. But I would tell any young person, if someone is constantly, because a lot of, you have what they call frenemies. A lot of girls are hanging out with other girls and these girls are critical of them. You need to get away from them, first of all. And secondly, it's not about you. People don't talk about things that are not, they don't see as a threat to them. If something doesn't bother them in that sense, they are not saying anything to you. So the fact that they're mentioning it simply means that they're envious and they wish that they had that. So don't take that on board at all. Just don't let anybody talk to you about how you look. And my social media has really created a whole new dynamic, and the bullying that goes on there is unbelievable. And if I think about some of the things I did as a young person, the mistakes that I would have made, I can't imagine what it would have been like if those mistakes were to be broadcast all over the world, and then you have to deal with people expressing their opinion. Everybody feels an authority on everything. It is troublesome, and people need to. I figure as well that a lot of these people don't have anything going on in their lives.
That is so weird. Because when you're busy, you have no
time. When you're busy, you have no time for that foolishness.
You have no time.
I mean, I was always the last person to hear any gossip. I'm not sure if it's because people knew I didn't necessarily entertain it, but there are people who thrive in those environments, and I'm not one of them. I am disinterested for the most part with what's happening in somebody's life in that sense. And gossiping can be very harmful. I try to usually tell people, and even if you saw it firsthand, you're not necessarily going to relay exactly what you saw. You're going to relay perception of what you
and
saw.
then by the time, and it's same thing with rumors too. By the time it get back to you, it's a whole different story. Like, I was there at that time doing that. Okay.
As a child, I remember hearing a story about how a man coughed up something on the street, right? It must have had a cold. By the end of the story, by the time the story got around, the man had coughed up 10 carrion crows.
Oh my gosh.
And nobody didn't bother to ask how he would have coughed up one carrion crow in the first place. But that's just the nature of human beings. And so and I caution people about that. I say,
I've also learned that if you're gossiping about people are gossiping about you.
Well, that's the thing.
Yeah,
if you when you leave the room, you become the subject.
Exactly.
And then people come bringing news to you about you, because the question you have to ask yourself is this: if somebody comes to you and they're telling you that this person said something that was really awful, you should ask them, why were you there?
Yeah, or how are you so comfortable receiving that
and being there? Because I'm not going to stand by and let anybody talk about my friend in front of me, and I'm not. Either I'm going to leave, right? Either I'm going to exit and I've done that where I'm in a situation where it was an inappropriate conversation and I just moved, or I'm going to challenge you on it. Yeah. I can't be your friend and then encouraging that kind of discourse. So, but people have to be given an opportunity, I guess, to grow and develop.
Yes.
And so we have to, and so when people make a mistake, you have to be able to understand that they're coming at you from where they're at, and there's every hope that they could get past that, and you don't just cancel them and finish them.
Most of the gifts or talents that we've discussed, they just came to you at specific times in your life. So I wanted to ask if there's pursuits that you're hoping to do. Yes.
Yeah, I think I would like to write at least one book.
Good.
I think I've had. Well, you don't get to my age in life and not having had experiences. But it's funny. I put together lots and lots of jewelry. I can make clothing that's fashionable, and so. But I think I want to write a book at some point in time.
Do you know what you want to write about?
I think about write about life experiences and relationships, because I'm that person. I'm always curious about how we relate to each other. We are all given gifts. All of us are given gifts. And what we need to do is to pursue figure out what our gift is and pursue that. Because it's not the same for everyone, and there should be no expectation that it's the same for everybody. But I was lucky enough, blessed enough to be growing up in an environment where my skills and my talents, my gifts were cherished and encouraged.
Thank you for joining me. Thank you for taking time out to be interviewed by me today for my show. It's something that it's my baby so it's my little baby that I'm trying to get off of the ground even more. But thank you guys for tuning in. See you again next Friday, 5 p.m. Mountain Daylight Time on YouTube. And as always, I will leave you with an affirmation. And today's affirmation is, I am gifted. Okay, we're all, like Andrea said, we're all gifted.
Yes,
and
we are.
It is so good when we can use those gifts, because diversity is always well needed. Not everything must not look the same, or everything must not sound the same. So remember, you have those gifts. Find your gift. Find your own gift and pursue it with all your might. So thank you again for watching, and I'll see you guys again next week. And remember to be kind to yourselves and kind to others. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.